Hey y'all, Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me today. Y'all, I'm a little nervous about this one. So I have owned this knife for months now, probably at least 3 months that I've had this thing. And I got to tell you, I love this knife, and I have been so hesitant and reluctant to put this into the Redneck Cut Test because, honest to God, I carry this more than probably any knife that I own at this point in time. There are just so many things I like about this knife. This is a Replica McNees PM MAC2, in case you were wondering. This is the 3.5-inch version, but this is a special knife for me. I did this review a long time ago. I'll put a link to that up there in the corner. You can go back and watch it. This has been sitting on my nightstand every night, and usually when I go out during the day, unless I'm just carrying a knife for testing at some particular point, this is usually the one. This or one of my regular Rosies are what goes into my pocket most of the time. I carry this, again, as much or more than any other knife that I've probably got. I actually put this just recently in a video, what I call my new Holy Trinity, my top 3 knives kind of all time. And all kinds of reasons. You can go back and watch those videos. I'm just worried this test could actually end up breaking my heart. Again, this is a replica. It's in VG10 steel. The real one uses MagnaCut, but I'm going to tell y'all, VG10 is actually nothing to sneeze at. So I've got these charts that I do, and I'll bring up one on the screen. You can see this a little bit better. But the VG10, according to Knife Steel Nerds, and this is all, you know, if it's heat treated just perfectly and the sharpening and geometry is all the same. All, you know, you have to understand those caveats to all of these tests, right? Everything is done right when they're doing these tests. But VG10 is a 4.5 on their edge retention, that middle score in each of these charts. You can see that beats out, you know, like 154 CM, CPM 154, XHP, better than LC200N, certainly way better than 14C, better than Nitro V, 9CR. So, well, it's about the same as a 9CR, supposedly, obviously better than 8CR. Not as good as ARRPM9, however. I'm questioning that score and that rating. My experience with the ARRPM9 is it does not last very well. And again, that may just be my batch of 1 or 2 knives that I have used and tested in that regard. Anyhow, my point being, VG10 is nothing to sneeze at, no slouch. And this is a pretty good budget steel overall. If you haven't seen these tests before, this is the old Redneck rating scale. This is not incredibly objective. I have a scale of 1 to 10. 1, it cuts like a spoon. 10, it can skin a catfish before it even know it was caught. This is not incredibly objective, although I try to cut the same amount of cardboard, the same amount of rope, the same amount of hose, and then do some ergonomic testing on a wooden stick just to see how it feels in different grips and how comfortable it is for kind of a harder use situation. After each of those, I'm going to use the incredibly scientific method of paper cutting to determine the sharpness of this knife. Right now, I'm actually putting this at a 9. There is a known nick in this blade about right there. I just ran into it. Now, you can easily, if you're going fast, you'll cut right through that, right? I mean, most people, if you just keep pushing, it'll pop right through it. So it's a this thing came pretty sharp from the factory. I have not resharpened this, believe it or not. It came with a really good edge where I got this. This is a 𝗔𝗲𝗃 knife for those of you who know and are wondering where this came from. So I can only give this, I'm going to give this probably an 8 out of 10. In terms of real sharpness, it's sharp as can be. I mean, you wouldn't want to get cut by this. And the action is so smooth, you don't want this coming down on your thumbnail all the time. You're going to end up like I am with all these scratches. I don't know if you can see that on my thumbnail there. So you have to learn how to drop it. That's one of the reasons I love this knife, is the action is so incredibly smooth and there is no bounce out. So like, this is certainly absolutely drop shut, but it's not like bad drop shut. It's like, to me, perfect drop shut, and it never bounces. I don't know what they've done, how they have managed this, what looks like a rather smallish stop pin over here, and or the blade or the detent, however that it feels like it's almost hitting a rubber stopper and just coming to a dull thud stop every time. So just the fit, the finish overall for what it is pretty darn good. No knife I own has a better blade to handle ratio. So look at the length. Well, let's do some size comps while we're here. So in terms of the overall size, this is another thing I love. Fits right in between the PM2 and the Para 3, right? But despite the fact that it is a shorter knife overall than the PM2 here. Look at the additional cutting length you get with the MAC2. That's just one of many examples that I've gone over here. So let's do a couple others. Let's get some of the big boys out and compare it to the big boys. So obviously much shorter than both the 𝗠𝗰𝗡𝗃 or the XM18. However, when you put these again in a side-to-side direct head-to-head comparison of cutting length, you get actual more cutting length on the MAC2 than you get on the 𝗠𝗰𝗡𝗃, which is still a great knife, and on the XM18, same thing. Just compare cutting length to cutting length. Man, I put this up against the 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗍 XL. This has essentially the same length as the 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗍 XL. I should have had one here. I just don't want to go dig it out right now. Just the blade to handle ratio is the best of any knife I have found for the size of the knife that it fits in your hand so comfortably. It's almost like a medium-sized knife with a extra full-size knife blade on it. I'm not a huge fan of the big sweeping belly. It certainly has its place. We're going to see when we get to the rope cuts that should become a benefit there, allow me to kind of rock through cutting that sisal rope. That should be a good thing there on that, but it's a little high. You can see off the center line, and you know, I do so much draw cutting like this, opening packages or cutting things like this, that you really have to crank that, and that's the only downside to this knife. I'm a big sheep's foot style blade for all those reasons. I find that's probably a more functional blade. That being said, if I'm going somewhere where I think I'm going to actually need to use my knife for any kind of decent cutting task, I'm still putting this one in my pocket. Ergonomics, I'm going to call them good. Not great, not exceptional, just good. You can see you've got a little bit of a flat spot here. That's not too sharp. That can always be an issue where the lock bar rests, but I can comfortably choke up to this position here when I want to, and that's where I'll be when I'm cutting cardboard. But for the most part, if you're going to push cut or anything like that, you're going to be choked back right on top of this choil. You can see I'm a size large glove, so you can definitely fit much larger hands on here. The jimping is, I'm going to call just about perfect. It could extend a little farther or come back into the handle of the blade in some ways, like the XM18 here does. You can see how that carries back here as well, gives you like full thumb coverage on the jimping. So you know, that could be an improvement. That being said, it is placed where I'm always going to have at least a part of my thumb in that jimping, and it is functional. It's deep enough that it works to get in there. It's not overly sharp or anything like that. The grip positions, you know, I've already kind of covered that. You can't do a pinch grip too easy on this unless you just are pinching both sides of the blade, because there's no forward finger choil there. There's no real comfortable way to wrap that bottom finger around it. So you can certainly pinch grip it like this. If you're doing some carving, or, you know, you're carving on a stick or something like that, that's easy all day long, but not the traditional kind of pinch grip that I usually work on. This is obviously a long clip point blade. We've already kind of talked about that. Partial flat ground, it's 138 thousandths thick, which seems like a high number, but then when you look at it and compare it, certainly if you compare it to any kind of heavy duty knife, you could begin to see this thing is much thinner than other steels and blades like that. It does get down to about 21 thousandths. It's only a partial flat grind. That was the other miss. I think if this was a hollow grind, and I know they do have some real versions with hollow grinds on them, this thing would have just been an absolute beast of a knife. That being said, it came pretty sharp from the factory. I'm feeling pretty good about it. I love the ergonomics. I just love the function, the feel. I think the VG10 is supposed to be about a 60 plus or minus HRC, so that should hold up pretty well. That's a pretty good rating for that. Again, I'm torn on the starting rating scale whether I should give it an 8, because I know there's a micro nick in this blade. I just didn't want to sharpen it because it's so easy just to cut right past it, and I use this knife every day. I'm like, why do I want to take off good steel that's still cutting well? So we're going to start from that point, knowing that there's a little micro nick in this blade, and we're going to see if it gets any worse. That being said, let's get over to the cutting table. It's time to find out, will this thing hold up or not? See you there. All right, as always, got about 400 square inches, 402 to be exact. We're going to start out in the typical saber grip that you would normally hold it in. This first part is at normal speed. Just want you to see how easy this blade passes through the cardboard, which is quite easily indeed. I mean, it's not the most sliciest blade you've ever had. It's not certainly like the 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗍𝗃𝗍, XL, which is 11 thousandths behind the edge, but it definitely tears through this cardboard with no problem at all. So
if you had to break down boxes all day with this knife, you would be very happy and quite content with it indeed. You know, especially given the fact that it's only a partial flat grind halfway up the blade. But again, really sharp knife going into this. Even though it only started at a 9, I know I have a little snag in the middle of the blade. If you were breaking down cardboard boxes, you would have no problem with this all day long. So it's every bit as sharp and slicey as you would expect any knife to be. Better than most, as good as most. It's just not the thinnest, sliciest blade ever. So we know we started with a few nicks in the blade. Let's see if, obviously they're still there. Let's see how much worse it made it. You know, that was a really tough call whether I should sharpen it or not. I always regret not sharpening it for some reason afterwards, but this is my daily user. And you can see right there, it passed through pretty cleanly. But here you go, you can see that snag right there, same place. So we're still dealing with the same snag in the middle of the blade. Unfortunately, when it does hold the blade up, even if it's just one little snag in the middle of the blade right there, I have to give it no higher than a 7 on the rating scale. Anything from an 8 to a 10 means there's no real snags that are holding that blade up. So I'm giving it a 7.5. Everything else is very sharp. So trying to do draw cuts with this knife, you can see I start off trying to use the tip, but then I just say, yeah, heck with it. Let's just use the belly of this blade. And this is some weird cardboard. There's something going on with the top of the piece. It just doesn't separate. It's done this on every knife that I've done. But you can see, you know, I'm not trying to play favorites here. This knife is not the, you know, like a great blade for doing those kind of draw cuts. It just is what it is. It can be done, though. Certainly, you know, if you need to, no problem. The hose, I'm going to also start with the belly. You can see I start right in the middle of that belly and try to rock that in there. I'm looking to push cut through this hose as much as possible. I don't want to have to be sawing back and forth in order to get it cut. And you can see no big problems there. Again, a little bit on the thicker side of a blade with a partial grind, no issues. You'll feel it. It's not, again, a rosy that's just super thin all the way top to bottom, but absolutely no problem. This is not designed to be that. This is designed to be a much more heavy duty, medium duty kind of work knife, and it pops through these little rubber pieces like no problem at all. That's where the belly really shines, is in those types of cuts. So let's see if we've done any more damage. And no, it looks like it's still just that same one spot right there in the middle of the blade, but you know, we kind of started with, got a little bit worse certainly after the cardboard, but just trying to really go through every inch of the blade to see, do we develop anything else? Nope, it's just the same thing right in the middle. So we're going to keep that at a 7 this time. Rope cut, looking for the same thing. I'm trying to pop right through the rope nice and cleanly. You can see I'm using the very top of that blade and rocking down onto the belly, and doing that gives me a pretty good rope pop. You know, not the best rope pop I've ever had, but certainly there have been a whole lot of blades that have done way worse than this one. You know, I'm trying to remain objective because, as I mentioned, this is really one of my favorite knives, and it's really easy to want to, you know, kind of say it did better than it really did. I'm trying to be honest with myself because, you know, for no other reason, I'm testing this for me. So I give it, you know, just okay, but it did good. That belly actually does a pretty good job. Sisal rope is tough to cut through if y'all have never done that. So now I'm just going to start out by testing just the tip of the blade. That's where I really did all the work on that rope. And you can see the tip of the blade here didn't sustain any real damage from that rope. So now I'm looking at the HRC they claim of 60. Is that potentially true? Yeah, I mean, based on what I'm seeing so far, I think that could be true. We'll see. We still got a little bit more testing to go, but we're now in between a 6 or 7, maybe a little bit worse. So hard to tell because I didn't do much cutting there with the middle of the blade. Yet that's what snagged. All right, wood cutting, I'm looking for ergonomics as much as anything, but I will tell you, in this test, this knife really bites, for some reason. It bites into the wood really well. I was getting very deep cuts, and you'll see in a second here, I'm going to switch over to the hammer style grip. But that feels really good. No major issues. I do feel that lock bar, the corner of that lock bar cut away just a little bit. Let's switch into a hammer grip, see how that does. You can see I'm getting some nice deep wood cuts into this method of holding it. So really good for, you know, outdoors use. And this VG10 is really good corrosion resistance wise. No hot spots with the clip, no real hot spots with the back of the knife. That's all the things I'm looking for. And now look, it just slices right through the paper like it almost got better after cutting the wood. And I've seen that in many tests before as well. It's just it is what it is. I don't, maybe cutting the wood helps realign the edges, the burr, if there's a micro burr on there. At any rate, I still do have those snags in the middle of the blade. Not much of that has changed, so we're probably going to stay about the same score as a 7. All right, let's flip over to do some stropping here. I think I've mentioned this on previous videos, but if you haven't seen my cut test, the brown side of my strop is a 16 micron. It is a diamond emulsion. Bark River Knives, I think, is where I got that emulsion, in case you're curious about getting one. So because I know I've got some, moderate nicks in this blade, I'm going to give it a little bit of extra love on the stropping here. I think what I end up doing is a grand total of about 24 strokes per side, just in case you're wondering. When I started stropping out, I didn't know how much is too much, how much is too little. You kind of have to see how it goes. It feels okay. It feels like most of those nicks are gone, and it's cutting pretty clean, but it's still not 100%. So I think what I really need to do is put it on a ceramic rod, and my guided field sharpener, the WorkSharp, the little handheld one, man, that thing does a great job of knives in this condition where it's just a little bit more than a strop alone can handle. A ceramic edge, you'll have this thing back to a 10. Do the ceramic, then strop it back with the strop, and you'll be in great shape. So I'm going to put this at an 8. I'm definitely going to give it a little bit more love before I put it back in the carry rotation. All right, let's dive into the numbers and see what we got here. And as always, I apologize. I know this is difficult to see on a tiny screen. Hopefully you'll have the opportunity to look at it at a bigger screen. I'm going to read the numbers out to you. So this is obviously the McNees PM MAC2. This is the 3.5-inch version of that. This is VG10 steel. However, I think what it really is the Chinese version, which is 𝗠𝗰𝗡𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗃. So if you ever see that 𝗠𝗰𝗡𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗃, that's the same thing as VG10. It's the exact same chemical composition. It's just their version of it. They said it was a 60 HRC. That was one of the big questions, is do I really think this is VG10, and is it probably a 60 HRC? I honestly have to say, yeah, I think it probably is. It did as well as any knife that came with a factory edge. Always, when I resharpen my knives before I do the test, they seem to do way better. That is without exception in any of my tests so far. So I really waffled back and forth. Should I sharpen it before the test or not? I already knew there was some little micro nicks in this blade. That, like I said, this is kind of my daily user. I've been using it quite a bit out there, so I already knew there were some issues going in, but I said, you know what? I don't want it to appear like I'm playing favorites, because this is one of my favorites. So I didn't. And now, again, as always, I kind of regret doing that, but the point is, the edge, I think, held up as well as you probably would expect from a VG10 blade. Certainly way better than all kinds of other steels that we have tested here on this channel, right? So I would say, yeah, there's a pretty good chance of that. Plus, the Chinese are so well known for doing that 10CR15. That's like their thing. They do that on all kinds of knives. So it's easy to buy into, yeah, this is VG10. And VG10 is a great steel, right? We looked at the charts back at the beginning. So if that was a real, well heat-treated, Knife Steel Nerds said it should be about a 4.5 on the edge retention scale for them. I did not sharpen it first. Started out, I'm giving it a 9. Probably should have really given it an 8 because there were snags. And if you got any snags at all, you can't go really higher than an 8, even micro snags. So maybe that was a little bit unfair, but it is what it is. 400 inches, ended up 7.5 after the test. Just, again, same little micro snags in the same spot. 3 hose cuts. Popped through the hose really nicely. Nice clean cuts using the belly of that knife. Didn't really change the edge much after that. Still giving it a 7. We did 11 rope cuts. Popped through the rope really nice. Again, that big round belly on that blade lets you really dig in and rock the blade through those cuts really well. And after the rope cuts, we ended up at still 6.5, maybe a little bit more off the edge, not a whole lot. And we did our wood cuts. We'll talk about the ergonomics in a minute, but still actually got a little bit better. So the cutting the paper after that was even better, so I gave it a 7. So it is what it is. We stropped it back 24 strokes aside, 16 and 6 micron. Still only got it back to about an 8. That probably needs to be touched up, like I said, with the ceramic rod, and it'll be good to go. I'm trying to be honest on this one because this, again, is one of my favorites. I wish I would have sharpened it first. I'm going to say the results here are really good overall, right? I'm trying to be fair on that. It would have been better if I had have sharpened it beforehand. Every knife has been, but I'm going to say the edge retention is certainly better than average compared to other knives that we've tested here on the channel. Very easy cutting through all materials, from the cardboard to the rope to the hose to the wood. It dug into everything really well. It never felt like it was too much or it wasn't cutting cleanly in any of those from start to finish. So really good cutting all the way through. You'd never know the difference. Good hose cuts and rope cuts, like I said. Good rope pop, good belly for those. Not great for the draw cuts, which is what we do a lot, even opening tape and packages and whatnot. But, that is what it is. You get what you get on this one. Great bite into the wood. Ergonomics were great overall. I did feel that lock bar just a little bit, the edge of the lock bar in my really hard push cuts, but not much at all on the top edge of the knife, which is where I usually feel it. The pocket clip is not an issue at all. Didn't feel that at all. This is overall still absolutely one of my favorite knives, and I'm still going to carry it just as much as I have before. Nothing in that regard has changed here. So in terms of edge retention, I'm going to put it at a 7, a little better than average. An average is 5 on my scale, and I do give some of my edge retentions much lower than that. So definitely better than average. 7 on the edge retention, but EDC, for me, it's a personal choice, right? That's all that is. I want to carry this knife. I still want to carry this knife. This has the absolute best blade to handle ratio. You're getting more blade for the size of this handle than any other knife that I own, period. And I would challenge you, if you've got one, do the same comparison. Put it against some of your bigger knives and see which one has the longer cutting edge on it. It just feels good in the hand. It's a small feeling knife in your pocket. Doesn't take up much space. Everything about it feels comfortable and good. The action is phenomenal, smooth drop shot action on it. I'm going to touch up this blade, get it back to a 10, and just keep on loving this knife. Hopefully, y'all will think that that's a relatively fair rating that I'm giving this thing. You got to see it for yourself. As always, I value your comments. Hit me up down below. Let me know what you'd like to see different. If you'd like to see me do some changes up in these tests, the way I do it, or present it to you, anything else like that, that's always welcome. I'd love to hear that feedback. If you're not already a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button. The notification bell also really helps the channel out. Throw your boy a thumbs up on your way out the door. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks so much for hanging with me. I'll talk to you soon. Y'all take care.